What is something that someone said to you that is so stupid you thought they were joking? Story 1, we were watching the ID channel about a couple of murderers that were executed during the reenactment scenes. Dude next to me says that's cool that they let them out of prison to film this. Story 2, I was waiting tables, and a customer asked me for water to go. But no ice please, I have a long drive and I don't want to get watered down. I started to laugh, but realized she was serious. So I repeated the order politely. Okay, water, no ice, thinking maybe she had meant to order a soda or tea or something and had misspoken. But no, she genuinely just didn't want any ice to melt in her water and water down her water. Story 3, I was on a road trip with my wife, and I had just woken up, and I remarked, hey, look, cows. She honestly responded, those aren't cows. They aren't black and white. I laughed. Thought she was joking. Nope. Straight up thought all cows were black and white. Story 4, lots of questions from customers in the rafting industry. At what elevation do deer turn elk? Who puts the rocks in the river? Where are the tracks that lead the boat? As if the Whitewater River trip is at Disneyland and the whole thing is a ride at the put-in. Can't I just leave my things here? So they'll be here when we get out. Tons of people think you take out on a river at the same place you put it. Like it's a circle and the current goes back uphill. We'll have to think of some more. Story 5, when someone mentioned that 1 in 3 people get cancer in their lifetime, another friend in the group said that the statistic is, and that he sees it as 50-50. Either you get it or you don't. This dude was studying architecture. Wonder if he thinks the odds of any building falling apart is 50-52. Story 6, former male coworker was talking about various health problems in the office. He said that he checked his symptoms with WebMD and that one of the closest matches was gestational diabetes, but he couldn't find any cases of men getting it. Story 7, I once had a conversation with a coworker who told me that they wished they had lived back in medieval times because it would have been fun to battle orcs and dragons. This was right when the Lord of the Rings movies were coming out and were very popular. At first, I assumed he was saying he would like to live in the LOTR universe. After a minute, I had a sudden realization. I came to realize he meant that he thought dragons and orcs and things like that really existed at one time. I and several of our coworkers spent the rest of the day and months after trying to convince him that wasn't the case. He strongly believed that during the dinosaur age, there were also dragons, orcs, trolls, etc., and we were fighting them with swords and knights. Story 8, my shift lead at the microbiology lab I work at told me that they believe that dinosaurs didn't ever exist, that they were mythical beasts like unicorns, and it'd be cool if they were ever real, but they weren't, so it's not. She also said that all fossils found are fakes to just get publicity. Story 9, school I worked at had a long-term sub in 8th grade because nobody wanted the position. One day in the lounge, I mentioned how one of her students was really annoying in the art teacher, and she goes, UGGH, that little retard is so annoying. He's trying to learn German too. I didn't respond because she just called a student a retard and was also trying to understand why I'm trying to learn German made him a retard. Then she goes, hey Race, what I want to know, German and Japanese, is they different? I stared at her for a while thinking she was making a joke, but she kept waiting for an answer. When I explained German came from Germany and Japanese from Japan, she goes, ugh, I don't even get it. And another fun story is the time in the lounge while everyone was eating, she loudly announced that she watched a video on Facebook and that we wouldn't believe what got pulled out of this man's. Literally all of us said we didn't want to know except for me because, well, I wanted to know, and she goes a whole, I thought they was going to pull out his intestines or something. Story 10, my sister and I were at my dad's house for his birthday dinner. My sister had brought her kids, my 4-year-old niece and 2-month-old twin boys. My sister was exhausted. She had hardly slept in the last 2 months, and coming to dinner was the first time out of the house in a while. She looked like, but was happy to be there with lots of family to take care of the kids for a couple hours. My stepmonster, who has never had kids, asks her, are you tired? She replies, yeah. The pregnancy was hard. I had complications from the C-section. They're not good sleepers or eaters. I'm always breastfeeding one of them. It's been a very hard couple months. I'm always taking care of one of them. Stepmonster replies, oh, that is hard. It sounds like when our dog was a puppy and we were kennel training her. Everyone turned to look at her. Mouse agape, including my dad. She wasn't kidding. My sister says, yup, it's exactly like that. Story 11, the spork is the devil's utensil because it is the amalgamation of the masculine fork and the feminine spoon and is trying to blur gender lines in society. Story 12, every time we used to visit a beach near my grandmother's house in Barbados, my mother used to remind us of a young woman who came up to her and asked her what state she was in because her boyfriend was playing a practical joke on her and telling her they were outside of America. And everyone knows there's nowhere outside of America. Story 13, one night after volleyball, we were hanging out at the bar as a mutual friend walks by at a pivotal moment in the conversation. My buddy asks him, hey guy, how long does a pregnancy last? He shrugs, says 18 months. We got a good giggle out of it. and then I just died after finding out he was serious. We were 30 years old. Story 14, I was talking to a coworker about global warming and how eventually polar bears could be extinct. He said, "What's a polar bear?" I said, "What do you mean?" He then said, "Well, a polar bear is nothing but a white-colored bear, so they will just leave the Arctic and live in forests." I thought he was joking, but no, he wasn't. Story 15, we were in English class, and this guy is really trying hard to debate something with the teacher. Probably some Oxford comma or something. Anyways, he said something along the lines of, "Well, I had a repeat in English class before, so I know this really well." I obviously start laughing, and he turns around and says, "Zach, I am literally more smartest than you." I looked for 5 seconds to see anything, but all I saw was the glaze of Kevin. Story 16, when I was a new teacher, one of the old-timers was venting in the teacher's lounge. She said, "This would be a great job if it wasn't for the kids." I laughed, and she exploded at me, told me I was still too young to hate them. She said I would grow up myself in a few years. That was 26 years ago. Kids are still 100 the best part of the job. I can't imagine anyone staying in education that hates kids. What a sorry life. What a sorry thing to do. How sorry for the kids. Story 17, a pregnant girl at work just sort of put it out there that her baby got its nourishment through her belly button. Like as in she believes that somehow her child is getting fed through her own belly button, not the baby is getting nourishment through the umbilical cord and what would become its own belly button. Another girl was walking by us at the time and literally stopped mid-step, shook her head, and then kept walking. Story 18, my brother told me today that he's pulling out his 401k way early despite the heavy penalties to invest in the stock market. This is because Trump is the president now, and unlike Obama, he's a businessman. SOS, there's no way he can lose. This is his new retirement plan. Story 19, when I was walking my dog out, some lady asked my dog what my name was, and when the dog didn't respond, surprise, surprise, she asked me why he didn't talk. Story 20, my ex and I were watching Jeopardy, and Alex Trebek read off an answer like, "The Inuit in Alaska were known to make this type of house out of frozen dihydrogen monoxide." My ex snorted and said, "There's no way they had those chemicals back then." Story 21, at work, I got a wet washcloth and squirted some dish soap on it to wash off a table. Coworker freaks out. "CW, OMG, you're not going to wash the table with that, are you? People could get sick. Me, what? Why inspects clean washcloth? CW, the soap. People will get shits from the soap, me. The soap that's meant for cleaning eating utensils. If they chugged it, they would, but this will certainly not give anyone the shits." No, I didn't say that. I stared at her completely dumbfounded that she was absolutely serious. Story 22, I met a girl who thought airplanes were UFOs or flying saucers. It never occurred to her that they were airplanes. Edit clarification of the alien variety. Story 23, there was a dude in my chemistry class who apparently didn't believe in the atomic theory of matter. He claimed no one could see atoms, so there was no reason to believe they existed. The professor just told him that he still had to learn it or he would fail the class. Also, a girl in my circle of friends said evolution was impossible because a few thousand years wasn't enough time for all that. I only realized she was serious when she got pissed at me for laughing at her. Story 24, I'm deleting this comment because now I'm getting harassed by people who think I deny the existence of proven conspiracies because they completely and utterly misunderstood the original comment. Story 25, not me, but someone I know. So he and his wife and there's friends out to go to the Super Bowl last year, maybe. They normally watch it live on TV. His wife says in the most serious straight face ever, "Where are the yellow lines that tell the scores and stats and stuff?" Story 26, I was checking out some cars with a friend at a car dealership that my friend was potentially interested in buying. I was just tagging along offering my opinion, but wasn't interested in buying one myself. At one point, the car dealership employee who was talking to my friend starts asking me questions like, "Would you be interested in buying a car too? Have you owned a car before, etc." Long story short, I tell him that I used to own a Renault car when I was living in Europe, but Renault is a company that doesn't sell cars in the US as far as I know. The employee responded by saying that European cars are not available in the US because they don't have seat belts or airbags. Story 27, a woman on local radio today saying the gender wage gap is real because she's a part-time cashier and her husband is a construction supervisor and he gets paid way more than I do. Story 28, I used to work at a popular fast casual soup sandwich restaurant. A woman asked my friend and I if there was cheese in the broccoli and cheddar soup. We laughed in her face. Turns out that's not how you were supposed to handle that situation. Story 29, my friend moved to another state from Alaska. When applying for a job, once they found out she had moved from Alaska, they asked if she would have any trouble providing proof of citizenship. Alaska is far and all, but is still part of the U.S. Story 30, I think I was in college at the time, and in biology class when they went over some human anatomy, particularly the human reproductive system. Now, I learned a lot of the basics back in middle high school and didn't think much of it when they were talking about the female organs, but the girl next to me was seriously surprised when the professor mentioned there was a separate pee-hole urethra and whole vagina. I remember she looked at me with the widest eyes and said they're different holes. Story 31, were you there? Honestly thought she was with me. We were in class, and we began talking about the Black Death, the bubonic plague, and I said that the bubonic plague was probably the deadliest disease outbreak in history, seeing as it wiped out a third of humanity. And this super-duper level 3 Christian girl asked me how I knew if it happened in the Dark Ages. I said that even though it happened a long time ago, that those cities were able to record what happened, the mortality rates, and its effect throughout Europe. No one has ever wondered if the Black Death happened. We know it did. She said, but you can't really know if it happened or not. I mean, were you there? She seriously didn't believe that the Black Death ever happened. This said that stupid line all the time. It was her go-to excuse. When she said that the Bible was the oldest written set of laws, and I said that the Code of Hammurabi is well known to predate it, and that there were at least 2 other set of rules created by the Sumerians that predate the Code of Hammurabi. She said that the Code of Hammurabi didn't exist. I Googled it and showed her that it was a well-known set of laws that have been written about in length. She said, but that's just the internet. They can make stuff up easily. Can they prove it? Can you? Were you there? She used this when it comes to a lot of things, especially evolution. Were you there? Just because something doesn't fit your stupid agenda doesn't mean it didn't happen. This sucked because she was honestly one of the most beautiful girls I've ever had the fortune of meeting. I had a friend in the class who was thinking of asking her out. And so as I when we first met her, and when she began to show the crazy, I remember that he and I made eye contact and moved our chairs away from her slightly, enough to show to the other that she was hot, but not worth it. Story 32, I live in New Mexico, and this summer I went up to NYC, and at my hotel I had a rooftop bar. I ordered a drink and got ID on my 22nd birthday. Cool, no problem. The lady looks at me and at my ID and said she couldn't accept it because it isn't a United States issued ID. I explained to her that New Mexico is a part of the United States. She argued and got her manager, in which she asked me if I had a passport and if I had that I could get my drink. The 49 states have a better education than New Mexico, and everyone still thinks New Mexico is Mexico. Story 33, my senior year in high school. A girl asked me if Grand Canyon was 1 word or 2. We live in Arizona, less than 2 hours from the Grand Canyon, and she had visited the month before on a class trip. Story 34, one time in high school, during a group assignment, a guy reading aloud misread a simple word, don't remember what it was. I jokingly asked, are you illiterate or something? And he replied, no, I'm right-handed. Story 35, coworker, I want to eat that. It has aspartame in it. Me, it's not really that bad for you. Right, coworker, how do you know? Me checked out some peer-reviewed journals on online. Coworker, so you just trusted some random page on the internet. Mia, how did you come to your conclusion about aspartame? Coworker, I Googled aspartame and clicked on the first 4 results, and they said it was bad for you. I realized that there's a lot of controversy regarding aspartame, but she basically told me not to blindly trust things on the internet, yet she got her own argument by doing exactly that. Story 36, a friend of mine used to tell me the craziest stories. One of the best ones was that it was entirely his fault that the Thanksgiving Day parade balloon float that knocked over the lamppost and killed that person along the parade route was entirely his fault, as he had not prayed and gone to church. I thought he was joking as it was so crazy and extreme, yet he remained sincere. The next was that his thermostat was being used to spy on him, and then he was being followed. There's a lot more at the time. I thought he was joking, but really it was the start of a mental illness. Story 37, I'm a karaoke DJ, and this random dude comes up and starts chatting me up. Supposedly he's well-known out of town and can freestyle rap, which he never did. He grabs a stack of slips and starts passing them out to patrons. All of my regulars come up and start singing, and he claims credit for getting them RO sing. Then he goes, so you're going to give me $10, right? I literally laughed in his stupid face. Story 38, wife had a question for an assignment some time ago, and Google wasn't a source. The question, how old are broiler chickens when they're killed? We had no idea, so I suggested we go to the chicken shop in a mall, asked the question, and the guy thought for a moment and replied 25 years. Then, seeing the looks on our faces, quickly changed to 17 years. In case you're wondering, the correct answer is usually 5 to 7 weeks, but sometimes up to 14 weeks. Story 39, this kid said he really wanted a communist country where you don't have to pay taxes. I proceeded to tell him that taxes pay for the construction of roads, etc., to which he replied, I hate roads, completely seriously. He said he was willing to hike to the local grocery store. Story 40, my uncle is a pretty funny guy. So we were talking about history, as he's also pretty smart, and he started saying some things that I thought he was trying to get some laughs out of. Turns out my uncle is also pretty racist. Story 41, my husband and I were playing Cards Against Humanity with my sister, who is 21, and her boyfriend. She takes a card, looks at it, totally dumbfounded by it, tells us she has no idea what it means, but that it's something with an A and looks like German. My husband and I look at each other and say, almost in unison, is it Auschwitz? Yeah, what does that mean? We started laughing, thinking she was kidding. I mean, it was CH after all. I figured she was just making a really dark joke or something. She was not. Her boyfriend then admits that he has no idea what it means either. Had to explain to my 21-year-old sister and her boyfriend about what Auschwitz was and what happened. Pulled up photos and some historical stuff online and had to chat it out for a good hour or more afterward. Both of them vote and are active in politics. Yeesh. That's what you get for going to high school in the Florida public school system, apparently. Story 42, a girl in my Jane Austen literature course said she wished she could hate capitalism, but she couldn't because she was a tourist and liked shopping too much. Story 43, I work in a shop in Cape Town, South Africa, dealing mainly with tourists. One of the things we stock is carved wooden animals. A few years ago, a guy came in and was looking for a carved male hippopotamus. I was a tad confused, as the carvings clearly don't have sexes, but he was adamant. He wanted a male. With some more gesturing, I finally found out what he was looking for, a rhino. He thought the horn of the rhino was an indication of being a male hippo. Edit spelling. Story 44 in English for year 12. Months before a final exam, we were watching Wag the Dog. During our practice essays, someone apparently treated the movie as if it was real. Our teacher started telling us how it was a movie, and it didn't really happen. A girl's hand went up, and she started asking questions about how they got the footage if it wasn't real. We suddenly realized why we're being told it's not real. Story 45, my mom was so excited and says, add your age to the year you were born, so I replied 2017. And she says, but it's like that for everyone. Isn't that amazing? I laughed for a long while before my brother told me she was serious and now seriously embarrassed. Story 46, someone tried explaining their theory of why the universe didn't get sucked into the black hole in the center of the galaxy. After a few minutes, I realized he was somewhat high. Story 47, 2-year-old daddy. Did you know there were dinosaurs billions of years ago? Dad, actually, son, it was 6,000 years ago. We don't associate it with these people anymore. Story 48, kind of like that. Years ago, I worked at a donut place. One afternoon, I'm taking the trash out, and 2 doors down was a vet, and they had a fenced-in area. I see 3 little dogs, all barking like mad at me. Bought no sound. I thought I had some hearing issues, and went and got a coworker to come out and confirm there was no noise. She looked and said the dog's vocal cords had been snipped to stop them barking. I really at first thought she was bullshitting me. Story 49, have you seen the latest episode of the news? They legitimately thought world leaders were characters. I don't know how they got so far on life, but they have rich parents. Story 50, apparently seawater is salty because these ancient giants pushed large mountains of salt into the oceans billions of years ago. My face said it all when I heard that. Story 51, a friend of my wife described finding a feather as a sign from her guardian angel. I now avoid any and all contact with her because I have no idea how to react to like that. Story 52, just yesterday over dinner, a friend said to me, did you know Elton John was in town yesterday? It wasn't Elton John, as I pointed out, it was Paul McCartney. She then said, close enough, they're both Beatles. Story 53, I invited a friend to see Fences with me. And when he asked what it was about, I told him Denzel plays this ex-Negro lead ball player. He stopped me right there and said only black people are allowed to use the N-word. Story 54, we were doing critiques in a creative writing class, and this 30-something ex-soldier wrote a horror story about a man eating so many crab legs he turned into a crab that was so bad, I thought it was a comedy and critiqued it as such. He was so mad he didn't talk to me the rest of the semester. He wanted to write YA novels about werewolves. Not ironically. Story 55, people don't have canine teeth because aren't supposed to eat meat. Vegan girl from work, I informed her that those pointy teeth in the front of her mouth are canine teeth. At the time, I couldn't pull up a photo, so she segued into saying that no human civilization has ever had to rely on meat. I honestly thought she was joking, but she argued the matter, so I dropped it as the battle to educate her seemed pointless. Edit spelling. Story 56, there are Catholics, and then there are Christians, meaning Catholics are not Christians. This is the same person who had the gall to tell me I wasn't as atheist as I thought I was. I just walked away, because you can't debate with that kind of stupid Adidas spelling up. Story 57, I had a coworker who tried to convince me that the only reason Wayne Gretzky was as successful as he was is because he had an enforcer on ice with him at all times, so players were too scared to try and do anything to him. I mean, They weren't completely wrong. It was pretty well known that if you mess with Gretzky, you would get stomped on. But come on, obviously I thought they were only being half serious at first. But they were adamant that Gretzky was just way overrated. Story 58, I was on a date, and we were playing Taboo at a coffee shop. Hers in the sky, me the sun. Her gesturing with her hand for me to keep going to planet. Me Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. Her continues her hand, gesturing motions me Earth. There's one more, me Pluto, it's not considered a planet anymore. Her, it's made of cheese, me the moon. The moon isn't a planet. Her, what is it then, me, it's a moon. Story 59, I thought the word hypocrite was spelled hypocrite because Hippocrates was always making things up on the fly. My high school nemesis never let me hear the end of it. Story 60, not someone, but rather a show. When watching South Park Scientology episode, even though they had the text, this is what Scientologists actually believe when they show the animated interpretation of it. I couldn't believe it and thought they just made it up. And I thought that for a few years before I watched an interview with Trey Parker and Matt Stone. This is so ridiculous. Story 61, roommate didn't know where William Shakespeare was from. Thought the translations were translations from another language rather than Old English to modern. Story 62, not the most unique one. A housemate believed that THR world is flat. I proceeded to laugh and say yeah, and the world is controlled by lizards masked as humans, haha, to which he stood up front, looking kind of puzzled, and started showing me conspiracy theories on YouTube. Story 63, my incredibly stupid stepmother, who's 65-ish, said, how did they know what the dinosaurs were called back then, in a very serious voice and facial expression while watching a documentary. Story 64, it was a day or so after the terrorist attack in Manhattan a little bit ago. My sister, her fiancé, and I went to go get Chinese. Somehow the subject came up while we were eating. Sister, I was watching TV with client, and it popped up as breaking news. The fiancé, yeah, breaking news, and it's not even in our state, sister, yes it is. It was in Manhattan. Me, no, it's not. The fiancé, Manhattan. New York, sister, yeah, New York is in Pennsylvania. Duh. She's had equally slow moments, a ton of them. Really, she just became a nurse. Story 65, we were playing a trivia game, and a good friend of mine didn't know who Queen Elizabeth was. We told her it's the Queen of England. We tried United Kingdom. She had no idea what we were talking about now. If you live in some obscure place with no basic education, sure, but we live in the Netherlands, so it's less than 1 hour away by plane. Story 66, someone once told me that pigs are the closest living relative to humans. I started laughing and asked what about monkeys and apes. They replied, I better Google this. You're laughing really hard. Story 67, I don't want a house someone has already lived in. My sister, while we were talking about her buying a house, and why she couldn't get one that was already in an established neighborhood and didn't cost as much, since he couldn't really afford a house anyway, but insisted on buying one. Was that run-on sentence exhausting to read? So was our conversation. Story 68, I had arrived 20 minutes before the start of my shift at a new job. So I decided to kill time in the break room and read a book. 2 minutes to go, I put the book in my locker and headed down to the sales floor to punch in. My boss sees me and taps his watch. You're late, he says with his usual smiling eyes. I chuckle in response, as if to say, right, how late? It is precisely 9 a.m. I'm docking your pay. Don't let it happen again. He fixes me with a stern look to make sure I know he's not joking. I look at the time clock. It says 9:01, a minute faster than my wristwatch. He's effing serious. I made minimum wage back then, so 1 minute literally equaled a few pennies. Yet he indeed took the time to subtract those pennies from my paycheck at the end of the month. When my shift was over that day, I still had a fair amount of stock on my cart left to shelve, which ordinarily I would have taken care of, but I strode past my boss and punched out, prompting him to say, you haven't finished your work. Shrugging my shoulders at him, I replied, sorry sir, it's 501, I'm late. Story 69, for about 1 minute, I had to convince a colleague that the reason a computer wouldn't turn on was not that I had fastened a zip tie around some power cords too tight, therefore cutting off the power like a water hose. Story 70, my mom had a stomach surgery, and when she was healing had to be very careful about what she ate. At first it was mostly liquid, then she slowly added back meat, dairy, then carbs. Her doctor did not want her adding bread back for quite a while though. During this no bread period we were at a restaurant, and she was eating a salad, but she reached over to steal a few of my fries. My 18-year-old sister knocked them out of her hand with a look of great concern, saying, Mom, no, you can't have bread. Remember, I thought she meant carbs at first, and I told her Mom got clearance a few weeks ago, but she interrupted me and said no, she can't have bread. So then I thought she was joking, so I just laughed it off. Then I realized she was serious. She thought fries were made of bread. Fries were made of bread. We spent about 30 minutes explaining it to her, and she seemed pretty shocked by the realization. I told my mom she needed to teach the poor soul to cook real food. Actually in the kitchen, like she had done for me. We've not let her live it down either, don't worry. Story 71 in this case. It was something I said, was in an AP psychology class and asked the teacher, do deaf people listen to music in Braille? With a straight face, teacher just stared and the class burst out laughing. I learned later on most of them thought I was just kidding because that's what I usually do, except I was dead serious. Story 72. One guy I knew way back was a crazy smart student studying physics, and he thought cheese was a vegetable. He tried arguing with me when I told him it wasn't one, claiming that his meal, bacon grilled cheese with a glass of milk, was a balanced meal with all 4 food groups. Story 73. We were having dinner with some friends at our house. I knew they were Christians and am Catholic, but didn't realize how far off the edge they were. We were talking about science shows or something random, and the dad goes, some of those shows are okay, but they can really go too far. I mean, dinosaurs. I don't think so. So very dead serious too. Story 74. My tenant is great for these. Him, don't be friends with people who are nice to you. They're using you. And don't be friend with people who are mean to you either. Me, so don't have friends. Him, exactly me. Can you not insult me? It's very judgmental. Him, judgmental. You're not even old enough to judge yourself. He is never being sarcastic. Story 75. My friend and I were joking around at work, and I was making a sarcastic comment about how she's 12 years old from the way she acts sometimes. I still love her, though, and one of our other coworker heard our conversation, and she reacted shook, and she said, wait, she's 12. We both thought the girl was being sarcastic, too. But turns out she 100% believed that. Story 76. I have a friend who thought that reindeer were made up, just like Santa. We all thought that she was joking at first, but ended up having to show her pictures to prove that we weren't messing with her. She acted like we told her that Santa was real. It was hilarious. Story 77. It was me that said it. New relationship with a super nice lady. Romantic weekend getaway. She suggests an afternoon float down a nearby river in a canoe. I know from experience canoeing is a serious test of relationship potential. My ex-wife and I couldn't even carry a canoe from the beach to the bay without getting into an argument. Anyhow, new relationship, super nice lady, and determined to be a great team player and competent man. I have plenty of experience on the water. This should be a cinch. Canoe livery guy drives us to the drop-off while he's taking the canoe off the trailer and telling us how long the float is and where the pickup point is. I am looking at the river. The wide, slow-moving river. The extremely slow-moving river, along with the fact that it is a blustery, windy day. I can't for the life of me tell which way the river flows. Some leaves are floating left. Some leaves are floating right. I toss in a stick, and it just floats around in a circle. I'm starting to sweat. I figure I have a 5,050 chance of guessing correctly, but if I guess wrong, it could be a disaster. Having to ask is a total embarrassment. I'm hoping the livery guy makes some reference to direction, but no. I'm desperately hoping to see someone else float by, but no. I picture us paddling upstream for 2 hours and being lost on the river. Livery guy hands us our paddles and says, so, if there's nothing else, I'll see you in a couple hours. Have fun. I bite the bullet and decide that asking is the best way forward. Yeah, which way is downstream? Livery guy and super nice lady both laugh, thinking I'm joking. No, I'm serious. Livery guy stops laughing and just points. I'm sure he was thinking that was the most stupid thing he had ever heard. We paddle downriver a bit. And super nice lady says, boy, am I glad you asked. I thought downstream was the other way. Story 78. My housemate asked me what the number of our house is. I replied with a number and the street name. And then she said she knew that, but she doesn't know the house number. I had to explain to her that the number in front of the street name is the house number, and that our neighbors have different numbers in same street. Story 79. Is the sky blue because there are greenhouse gases and the sun is yellow and green, and yellow make blue? It was a serious question. I teach math, but I stopped my lecture that day to have a lesson on both the diffusion of light wavelengths and basic color mixing. Story 80. Had a very interesting chat with my 19-years-old yesterday. He was 19 in September, which is relevant to this story. He's gay, and he went on a date on Friday. We talked about it yesterday, and he was telling me how well the date went and that they'll be seeing each other again. Then this conversation followed me. That's great. I'm glad you had a good time. How old is he? Sonny's 18, but be 19 in January, so I'm not worried about it being younger cause. It's only by 8 months. Me 4 months. Son, no. There's 8 months between January and September. So it's 8 months difference. Me, no, that's not how it works. You were born in September before him. So it's only 4 months difference. Son, no. I'm right. It's 8 months. He then proceeded to count the months between Jan and September on his fingers. Me, it's 4 months. If he was going to be 20 in January, then it would be 8 months. But he's going to be 19, which means he was born 4 months after you, which means there's only 4 months difference in your age. Son, while I say it's 8, and I know I'm right, he then stormed off ahead of me as we were walking back from the shop. Me shouts, ITS 4 months. When I told my mom about it, she laughed and said, maths has never been his strong point, has it? Funny thing is he's actually really intelligent, just at maths lol. Not something someone told me, rather something I told someone else. I'm a guy, and I was having pretty painful stomach aches like an idiot. I decided to look at my symptoms online, found an article on WebMD for some disease with a large complicated name and the exact same symptoms I was facing. The article mentioned getting rest as the best way to get over it. At this point, the stomach pains were excruciating, so I decided to go to a local clinic. I mentioned the name of the disease I found online to the doctor. Trying to be helpful, the doctor stares at me for a few seconds, then starts laughing. Turns out the complicated name was just a fancy way of saying periods. This is why you don't use the internet as your primary source of health advice.